Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On this Qnews special coverage, global outrage is mounting after Israeli forces intercepted the global Sumut flotilla, a civilian mission of 50 vessels carrying aid and over 500 volunteers to Gaza, detaining hundreds, including prominent activists. Israel says the ships were stopped and passengers transferred safely to port, but organizers denounced the operation as illegal and accuse Israel of cutting communications at sea. Stay tuned as we go deep to analyze these events and their consequences. A vessel from a Gaza aid flotilla intercepted by Israel has docked in Cyprus as the authorities in Larnaca confirmed the boat carrying 21 foreigners sought refuge for refueling and humanitarian needs. Cyprus said on Friday the vessel, part of a flotilla halted by Israel, arrived in Larnaca with 21 passengers, all of whom were registered and given basic support and consular help. It remains unclear if the boat was among those seized by Israeli forces on Thursday, when more than 450 activists, including Greta Thunberg, were detained after Israel stopped most of the 40 vessels heading to Gaza. Italy said the detainees would likely be deported on charter flights early next week, with 4 Italian lawmakers already released and flying home on Friday. Displaced Gazans expressed frustration after Israel intercepted the global Sumut flotilla, a civilian mission of about 50 vessels carrying aid and over 500 volunteers from 40 countries aiming to break the blockade. Residents said they had awaited the flotilla's arrival for weeks, hoping it would deliver food, medicine and expose Gaza's dire conditions. Organizers said the ships faced drone and intimidation attacks and that some were cut off from communication after being seized. Israel confirmed detaining several vessels and transferring passengers to port. Gazans warned that preventing the flotilla from reaching shore hides the enclave's worsening hunger and humanitarian crisis. A Palestinian crew member says the vessel diverted to Cyprus to avoid being attacked and kidnapped by Israeli forces during a Gaza aid mission. Osama Qashu, aboard the Summertime, said the boat carrying doctors and journalists to monitor conditions at sea changed course and docked in Larnaca for safety. He described the mission as fully legal under Cyprus and international law and condemned what he called piracy by Israeli authorities. Cyprus registered all passengers and provided assistance on arrival. Organizers say one aid vessel and marionettes remained sailing strong towards Gaza even after Israeli forces intercepted most of the flotilla. The global Sumut flotilla said during a live stream that the marionette was less than 77 nautical miles from Gaza on Thursday night and about 10 nautical miles from the point where Israeli forces stopped other boats. Israel has faced international condemnation after seizing nearly all 40 vessels and detaining more than 450 activists, including Swedish campaigner Greta Thunberg. Organizers said many detainees were transferred to a cargo ship before being taken ashore. For further analysis, we are joined from Cairo by Al Ahram Managing Editor Mohammed Izzeddin. Good evening to you, sir, or good afternoon, and welcome to Q News. Now, let me start by asking, what does Israel's interception of the global smooth flotilla reveal about the legality of its blockade on Gaza under the international maritime law?
Very beginning, thank you very much for Q News for inviting me for this wonderful dialogue, and congratulations for the first anniversary of the broadcast of the channel. Definitely Israel is combating the figures. The Sumud flotilla is a symbol of resistance and providing assistance and help and humanitarian aid to Gaza, but Israel is foiling any attempts to gather the efforts to support and to relieve the consequences of the genocide and the lack of assistance to Gaza Strip through the different ports. Israel is allowing only since the re-establishment of the delivery of assistance, only allowing 10% of the assistance that is needed by the Gaza. There is a need of more than 600 trucks a day. Israel only allows a few number of trucks during the Thursday and Friday. So the auditing and monitoring, Israel is returning trucks back toward Karm Abu Salim. Then Israel is returning and pushing back the other trucks, and it prolongs the time for monitoring and auditing in order to ensure the continuation of the genocide and starvation war against Gaza. The flotilla of Sumud is another attempt by the civil society and international society in order to raise their voice to the whole international community after they did, most importantly, UN agencies, considering that what is done by Israel is a genocide war, and it uses the weapon of starvation against innocent civilians in Gaza Strip.
Right. How might Israel's actions, including drone intimidation, detentions, and alleged, or rather, the piracy or the so-called and described as piracy, affect its diplomatic standing and expose it to legal consequences?
Israel occupation is facing its worst situations since the 70s. There is a back from the international community. Israel's practices facilitate the repulsion by its allies, most importantly U.S. The U.S. plan and the proposal by Trump is forced on Israel, despite of what is alleged that Israel is the 51st state of the United States of America, but the practices and actions of the extremist government representative of Israel is embarrassing U.S. government, not only participating in the confusion and distorting the foreign policy of Israel, but also it has adverse consequences and negative impacts on the image toward its main ally, USA, and any country supports Israel in this phase. So the consensus of the international community and the European states and the role that recognize of the two-state solution and a Palestinian state as an independent state calling for it to stop the genocide still is an adverse impact and a consequence which is very prominent against the Israeli extremist government. Those representatives who only care for their positions and titles, and they continue the occupation of the lands, imposing a military force on the ground that will not be useful with these matters in view of the refusal of the international community that we see increasing. Even the confused and tensioned relations with the main partner, USA.
Now, what message did the interception send to civil society missions who are wanting or who are attempting to break the blockade and or so as to deliver the humanitarian aid into Gaza?
Without a doubt, the use of violence, which is unjustified against civilians and against international activists that have no arms and they don't belong to any, especially the Palestinian people, is an attempt to terrorize the international community in order to prevent the recurrence of these flotillas and the campaigns, or to do any initiatives for the benefit of Palestine by the international community, whether real actions like this flotilla or the other electronic initiatives that is started to increase in the cyber arena of the international community. In addition to this, is a message that the Palestinian people face a genocide by the occupation army, and such international media has changed its position after supporting Israel or getting away from mentioning the atrocities of Israel. But the current image is very clear. Israel is trying to terrorize the international community. Also, it is trying to confuse and stop and hinder any international initiatives or campaigns. And they are known for not respecting international treaties or agreements. So the delay of ceasefire, especially the attempt to affect adversely and to change the Trump proposed plan for the ceasefire, is the main objective of the current government in Israel and the Israeli army and against the Palestinian people.
Now, preventing the flotilla from reaching Gaza, how far does it exacerbate the already catastrophic humanitarian crisis, including definitely hunger, medical shortage? We are seeing lots going on the ground in the Palestinian territories.
What we see and witnessing all on the cameras and TVs and social media, the occupation army of Israel is sieging and imposing a blockade against Palestinian people, the innocent civilians, in addition to the discontinued atrocities against safe havens, especially that we see the catastrophic logistic situation against the assistances provided by Egypt toward the Karm Abu Salim crossing, and not allowing but only margin amount because of the inspections imposed on these assistances, allowing only the least rate of assistances, despite the role, which is very big by Egypt at the diplomatic and logistic level to deliver the assistances. But there is strange keenness by Israel and the occupation army of Israel to resist and stop any international attempt, the same as happened with the Sumud flotilla. And the use of violence also is one of the major tools by Israel. Interception of the flotillas and the vessels in the international waters to break. This is a break of the international laws and maritime laws.
Now, the detention of more than 450 activists, definitely including the high-profile figures like Greta Thunberg, how did that shift global public opinion or show the real image and increase the international pressure if it happens on Israel?
To second what you mentioned, this matter, that means that Israel does not only respect the cause, but also does not respect the international high-profile figures by any way. So, consequently, there is a resistance by Israel to resist and to fail any attempt to help the Palestinian people and to deliver the assistances by any way. And even these peaceful, symbolic initiatives that are done by the international community is resisted by Israel. And this is against an insult against famous figures and an insult toward the international laws and norms in order to continue their genocide war against Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. This matter is done by Israel systematically, and the non-respect of the international figures is not a new matter to Israel. There is killing of journalists, killing against international activists, as happened with the U.S. Journalist several years ago in one of the setups by the Israeli loaders during the destruction and destroying of the territories and buildings in the West Bank.
Right. What role can third-party states like Cyprus, for instance, play when vessels seek refuge during such missions? And how might their actions shape future humanitarian efforts through the sea?
I'd like to emphasize that the international community has sympathy with the Palestinian cause and with the stop of the genocide war. Any attempts or any efforts in order to support and provide any assistance to the Sumud and Freedom Flotilla or any facilitations will be a step forward in order to relieve the burden on the international activists in order to support their efforts to deliver their message to the international community first, then also to provide any help to show the real image of the atrocities of Israel against the Palestinian people in Gaza and their attempts to prevent any delivery of assistances or humanitarian aids, and to show that there is a possibility for other countries, regardless of the obstinance of Israel, that the international community can provide any help to the Palestinian cause or to provide the least amount of support to international activists or even to the official campaigns and official initiatives, in addition to continuing to impose isolation politically against Israel and to have any and to cut any relations with the economic relations with Israel. For example, to stop exporting of weapons that are used against the innocent civilians in Gaza.
Right, that was Mr. Mohammed Aizadeen from Cairo, Al-Ahram, Managing Editor. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. And back to our coverage, thousands rallied in Bangladesh's capital on Friday to protest Israel's interception of a Gaza aid flotilla and the detention of hundreds of foreign activists following Friday prayers. Several thousand demonstrators marched through Dhaka carrying Palestinian flags and chanting anti-Israeli slogans. The protests came after Israeli forces boarded the flotilla at night, detaining more than 450 activists, as live footage showed passengers with their hands raised. Organizers from Jamaat-e-Islami demanded that the United Nations disclose the conditions and location of the detained aid workers, calling the operation a violation of international law. Tens of thousands marched across Italy on Friday in a nationwide strike supporting a Gaza aid flotilla intercepted by Israel earlier this week. The CGIL trade union organized protests in over 100 cities, with demonstrators waving Palestinian and Union flags and demanding Italy take a stand against Israeli policies. In Palermo, protesters called for the recognition of a Palestinian state, a move Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said would only happen if all Israeli hostages are freed and Hamas is excluded from any future government. The strike disrupted rail services nationwide, though metro lines in Rome and Milan remained open. Protesters in Brazil took to the streets on Thursday demanding the release of Brazilian activists detained after Israel intercepted a Gaza-bound aid flotilla. Crowds rallied outside the Itamaraty Palace in Brasilia, urging President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's government to impose sanctions on Israel and secure the activists' safe return. In Rio de Janeiro, demonstrators marched with Palestinian flags and banners condemning what they called a violation of international law. The global Samud flotilla carrying food and medicine to Gaza was seized on international waters, with organizers accusing Israel of international kidnapping. Pressure is mounting on Lula's government to respond more forcibly. And thousands protested outside the Israeli embassy in Athens, condemning Israel's interception of a Gaza aid flotilla. Demonstrators waved Palestinian flags and demanded the release of detained crews, calling on Greece's government to denounce Israel's actions. Protesters described the rallies as a defense of dignity and humanity amid outrage over Israeli forces boarding ships trying to breach the Gaza blockade. Similar demonstrations took place in cities across Europe and beyond, including Dublin, Paris, Berlin, Geneva, Buenos Aires, Mexico City, and Karachi. Protesters in Tunisia clashed with police near the U.S. embassy during a rally against Israel's interception of a Gaza aid flotilla. Crowds in Tunis chanted in support of Palestinians and the global Sumud activists trying to push through police lines as they marched towards the embassy. The protests came amid mounting global outrage over Israeli forces boarding ships attempting to breach the Gaza blockade. Right on for further analysis. We're joined from Cairo by journalist and researcher Mr. Ihab Omar. Good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me here start by asking, what do the global protests in response to Israel's interception of the Gaza aid flotilla reveal about shifting international public opinion towards Gaza and the atrocities and the blockade that is committed by Israel?
My greetings to you and the audience of Q. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, the public opinion of the international community that have become against the procedures taken by the occupation of Israel. There is a great transformation which is unprecedented, and the responsiveness with the Palestinian cause and against Israel. Israel didn't have publicity within the international public opinion, especially in Europe, as so-called by Zionists. But what happened over the past few years and different over also the previous wars, this time is different. There is 100% of a change of the public opinion in the international arena against Israel and whatever it does against the flotilla of Samud and its stages of the interceptions and other actions by Israel, even by the occupation in Gaza in specific, and these targetings of innocent civilians. We are witnessing a revolution in international public opinion, not only seen in the protests in the streets inside the countries, but we see full control of the activists and entrepreneurs and the broadcasters, even from Europe and USA. We are talking about activists and influencers from the Middle East and also from US and EU. They are talking with a speech against Israel to refuse the war, refusing the occupation, refusing the atrocities, in addition to the genocide committed by Israel. That's why Netanyahu, when he went to USA, he met with the activists and influencers from TikTok and other platforms like X and Twitter in order to make a counter attack But this is unprecedented situation that we see in the social media platforms and around the world. The whole world currently within in the reality and the social media, both sides, there is moves against the Israel procedures. They understand well the allegations by Israel and the genocides against the Palestinian people. For the first time, I see activists and thinkers from EU and USA seeking and searching the roots of the problem, and they themselves respond to the lies of Zionism and the attempts of Israel to make any confinement against the Judaism recitals, and calling and alleging that this is an assistance and support for them in their allegations.
Now, how could this wave of demonstrations, those ongoing demonstrations from Bangladesh to Brazil and across the whole Europe, increase diplomatic pressure on Israel and its allies at the United Nations? And definitely we're speaking about a certain ally here.
A very successful example in Italy, the Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, she was not agreeing with the New York announcement or declaration for the two-state solution, or the solution proposed, and we have seen the protests in Italy at all the states of Italy that made Italy to assign the declaration, but that was suspended of the recognition of a Palestinian state until the end of the war, and several other conditions and procedures requested by Italy. When we see the attempt and the experience of Italy from refusal of recognition of Palestinian state and to be ready to recognize the Palestinian state with some conditions as requested by Italy. Here we can understand that these protests are not only folklore or just mere actions or some images and pictures, but this is influencing the decision makers in USA and Italy and EU in general. At the end, this person who goes to the street for protesting, they have a vote in the elections. They are able to maintain or foil the governments or remain them in authority. Italy, in specific, there are very much of concerns that Italy will reach early parliament elections, or that these policies may lead to ousting the current government of Italy in the nearest elections. Consequently, there is no doubt that these protests and uprisings that we see and the influence actions from USA and Italy are not only figures or symbolic actions, but they have real impact on the current incidents that may impact the election processes and decision-making cycle in EU and USA.
Now, finally, here and briefly, please, how might the mounting public opinion, outrage, and the accusation of the international community of Israel of kidnapping affects the Israel's standing in or before the international community, before law, before the international laws, of course, and references? How would that reflect on Israel's standing? Briefly, please.
Unfortunately, Israel is armed with its partnership with the USA. They have a very strong tie. The geologist of Egypt, Gamal Hamdan, the great geologist, he said that once a day that the Israel is the 51st state of USA, and when the activists talk about Israel, they call it the blue state. So in order not to have a fake optimism, there is a ceiling of the influence of the peace process because of the impact of the rage that we see in EU and USA, because Israel is implementing a USA agenda, which is a very long-term stage. So there is a difficulty in the Middle
Yes.
East waiting for waiting for the responses of Hamas to the Trump
Yes,
proposal.
that's clear, but this is not exactly the topic that we are speaking about. But yes, but very much indeed, we are awaiting for the response of Hamas and others. That was Mr. Ihab Omar from Cairo, the journalist and researcher. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And I guess that concludes our special coverage for now. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.